Once upon a most early time was a Neolithic man, and he lived cavily in a cave, and he wore very few clothes, and he couldn't read, and he couldn't write, and he didn't want to, and except when he was hungry, he was quite happy. His name was Tegumai Bopsuli, and his wife's name was Teshumai Tewindro, and his little girl daughter's name was Taffimai Metalumai, which means small person without any manners who ought to be spanked, but I'm going to call her Taffy. Now listen and attend. One day, Tegumai Bopsuli went down through the beaver swamp to the Waigai River to spear carpfish for dinner, and Taffy went too. Tegumai's spear was made of wood with shark's teeth at the end, and before he'd caught any fish at all, he accidentally broke it clean across by jabbing it down too hard on the bottom of the river. They were miles and miles from home. Of course, they had their lunch with them in a little bag, and Tegumai had forgotten to bring any extra spears. "Well, here's a pretty kettle of fish," said Tegumai. "Take me half a day to mend this." "There's your big black spear at home," said Taffy. "Let me run back to the cave and ask Mummy to give it to me." "Oh, it's too far for your fat little legs," said Tegumai. "Besides, you might fall into the beaver swamp and be drowned. No, we must make the best of a bad job." So he sat down, and he took out a little leather mendy bag full of reindeer sinews and strips of leather and lumps of beeswax and resin, and began to mend the spear. Taffy sat down too, with her toes in the water and her chin in her hand, and thought very hard. Then she said, "I say, Daddy, it's an awful nuisance that you and I don't know how to write, isn't it? If we did, we could send a message for the new spear." "Taffy," said Tegumai, "how often have I told you not to use slang? Awful isn't a pretty word. But it would be a convenience, now that you mention it, if we could write home." Just then a stranger man came along the river, but he belonged to a far tribe, the Tawaras, and he didn't understand one word of Tegumai's language. He stood on the bank and smiled at Taffy, because he had a little girl-daughter of his own at home. "Come here," said Taffy. "Do you know where my mummy lives?" And the stranger man said, being, as you know, a Tawara. "Silly," said Taffy, and she stamped her foot, because she saw a shoal of very big carp going up the river just when her daddy couldn't use his spear. "Don't bother grown-up," said Tegumai, so busy with his spear mending that he didn't turn round. The stranger man thought, "This is a very wonderful child. She stamps her foot at me and she makes faces. She must be the daughter of that noble chief who is so great that he won't take any notice of me." So he smiled more politely than ever. "Now," said Taffy, "I want you to go to my mummy, because your legs are longer than mine and you won't fall into the beaver swamp, and ask for Daddy's other spear, the one with the black handle that hangs over our fireplace." The stranger man, and he was a Tawara, thought, "This is a very, very wonderful child. She waves her arms at me and she shouts at me, but I don't understand a word of what she says. But if I don't do what she wants, I greatly fear that that haughty chief, man who turns his back on callers, will be angry." So he got up and twisted a big flat piece of bark off a birch tree and gave it to Taffy. He did this, best beloved, to show that his heart was as white as the birch bark and that he meant no harm. But Taffy didn't quite understand. "Oh," she said, "now I see. You want my mummy's living address. Well, of course, I can't write, but I can draw pictures if I've anything sharp to scratch with. Please lend me the shark's tooth off your necklace." The stranger man, and he was a Tawara, didn't say anything, so Taffy put up her little hand and pulled at the beautiful bead and seed and shark tooth necklace round his neck. So he gave Taffy the shark's tooth, and she lay down flat on her tummy with her legs in the air, like some people on the drawing-room floor when they want to draw pictures, and she said, "Now I'll draw you some beautiful pictures. You can look over my shoulder, but you mustn't joggle." Now, first I'll draw Daddy fishing. Tisn't very like him, but Mummy will know because I'll draw his spear all broken. Well, now I'll draw the other spear that he wants, the black-handle spear. Looks as if it was sticking into Daddy's back, but that's because the shark's tooth slipped and this piece of bark isn't big enough. Now, that's the spear I want you to fetch, so I'll draw a picture of me, myself, splaining to you. Of course, my hair doesn't stand up like I've drawn, but it's easier to draw that way. Now I'll draw you. I think you're very nice, really, but I can't make you pretty in the picture, so you mustn't be offended. Are you offended? The stranger man, and he was a Tawara, smiled. He thought, there must be a big battle going to be fought somewhere. And this extraordinary child, who takes my magic shark's tooth but doesn't swell up or burst, he's telling me to call all the great chief's tribe to help him. He is a great chief, or he would have noticed me. Look, said Taffy, drawing very hard and rather scratchily. Now I've drawn you, and I put the spear that Daddy wants into your hand just to remind you that you're to bring it. Isn't it a beautiful picture? And do you quite understand, or shall I explain again? The stranger man, and he was a Tawara, looked at the picture and nodded very hard. He didn't even ask Taffy the road, but raced off into the bushes like the wind with the birch bark in his hand, and Taffy sat down most pleased. Meanwhile, the stranger man ran for some miles, till, quite by accident, he found Teshumite Tewindro at the door of her cave, talking to some other Neolithic ladies who'd come in to a primitive lunch. Taffy was very like Teshumite, especially about the upper part of the face and the eyes, so the stranger man, always a pure Tawara, smiled politely and handed Teshumite the birch bark. As soon as Teshumite saw the picture, she screamed like anything and flew at the stranger man. The other Neolithic ladies at once knocked him down and sat on him in a long line of 6, while Teshumite pulled his hair. "It's as plain as the nose on this stranger man's face," she said. "He has stuck my Tegumai all full of spears, and frightened poor Taffy so that her hair stands all on end. And not content with that, he brings me a horrid picture of how it was done. Look!" She showed the picture to all the Neolithic ladies sitting patiently on the stranger man. "Most shocking," said the Neolithic ladies, and they filled the stranger man's hair with mud, at which he was most surprised. And they beat upon the reverberating tribal drums, and called together all the chiefs of the tribe of the Tegumai with their hetmans and dalmans, all the Neguses, woons, akhuns of the organization, in addition to the warlocks, anjacoks, juju men, bonzes, and the rest, who decided that before they chopped the stranger man's head off, he should instantly lead them down to the river and show them where he had hidden poor Taffy. Well, by this time the stranger man, in spite of being a Tawara, was really annoyed. However, he said nothing till all the tribe of Tegumai were assembled, and then he led them back to the bank of the Waigai River, and there they found Taffy making daisy chains, and Tegumai carefully spearing small carp with his mended spear. "Well, you have been quick," said Taffy. "But why did you bring so many people? Daddy, dear, this is a surprise. Are you surprised, Daddy?" "Very," said Tegumai, "but it's ruined all my fishing for the day. Why, the whole dear, kind, nice, clean, quiet tribe is here, Taffy." And so they were. They were all there, prancing and shouting, and they frightened every fish for 20 miles, and Tegumai thanked them in a fluid Neolithic oration. But I don't believe you brought my daddy's black-handled spear after all," said Taffy. "And what are you doing to my nice stranger man?" They were thumping him by 2s and 3s and 10s, till his eyes turned round and round. He could only gasp and point at Taffy. "Where are the bad people who speared you, my darling?" said Teshumite Tewindro. "Well, there aren't any," said Tegumai. My only visitor this morning was the poor fellow that you're trying to choke. Aren't you well, or are you ill, O tribe of Tagumai? He came with a horrible picture, said the head chief. A picture that showed you were full of spears. Oh, perhaps I'd better explain that I gave him that picture, said Taffy. But she didn't feel quite comfy. You, said the tribe of Tagumai altogether, small person with no manners who ought to be spanked, you? Taffy, dear, afraid we're in for a bit of trouble, said her daddy, and put his arm around her so she didn't care. Well, I wanted the stranger man to fetch Daddy's spear, so I drawed it, said Taffy. There wasn't lots of spears. There was only one spear. I drawed it 3 times to make sure. I couldn't help it looking as if it stuck in Daddy's head, and there wasn't room on the birch bark. Nobody said anything at all for a long time, till the head chief laughed. Then the stranger man, who was at least a Tawara, laughed. Then Tagumai laughed till he fell down flat on the bank. Then all the tribe laughed more and worse and louder. Then the head chief of the tribe of Tagumai cried and sang and said, "Oh, small person without any manners who ought to be spanked, you've hit upon a great invention." "I didn't intend to. I only wanted Daddy's black-handled spear," said Taffy. "Never mind. It is a great invention, and some day men will call it writing. At present it's only pictures, but a time will come, O babe of Tagumai, when we shall all make letters, all 26 of them, and then we shall be able to read as well as to write, and then we shall always say exactly what we mean without any mistakes."